So thank you very much, guys, for coming. We have a great, hopefully a great final session for you. We have some great VCs from across Europe to talk about venture capital, which of course biotech would not exist if it was not for the venture capital investment. So I'd like to introduce Holger Reithinger from Forbion, Cédric Moreau from Sofinnova, and Giovanni Mariggi from Medici. Perhaps if you could just go around quickly and maybe say a little bit about yourself and what your company does, that would be great.
Okay, myself, Holger. I'm a biochemist by training, and I'm working in venture capital since '97, so the early days here in Germany, and currently I'm a partner with Forbion. Forbion is a Dutch venture capital company. We have raised recently our fund number 4, which has 360 million euros under management, which is more or less solely focused on drug development companies in Europe or in the US. And we're supporting typically innovative new concepts from startups or the very early stage, if nothing is more or less there, towards later stage financing. Historically, we have also supported diagnostic and meta companies, which we won't do to the same extent in this fund. We are headquartered in Naarden, which is a small town southeast of Amsterdam, and we have an office in Munich. And we have a range of venture partners across Europe and one person in the US.
Great, thanks.
Hi, Giovanni Mariggi. I as well am a biochemist by background. Have been in the VC industry for 7 years now. Partner at Medici. Medici is a relatively young firm, only 3 years old, but it was formed from the spin-off of the biotech team from Index Ventures, which is a firm that had been around since the mid to late 90s. And really our mandate is to go out there and create companies, find products, and our currency is really product vision. So we're less focused on the big glitzy platforms that will and never do deliver 10s or 20 leads in the next 3 years, but we really are very happy to take binary bets on exciting new biology, even able to come into a company formation situation where there's some new target biology, a crystal structure, and are there to really help and support that product vision, delivering real assets to go into pharma pipelines. As Medici, we've raised €500 million over the last couple of years. We'll probably have something else in the near term as well, and have invested over 50 companies over the past 20 years.
So I'm Cedric. I have a financial background. I worked during 20 years in the healthcare bank industry, doing M&A, equity capital market for biopharmaceutical, medtech, biotech companies. I joined Sofinnova partners 1 year ago to join a kind of new fund and thesis for Sofinnova, more late stage fund, namely crossover fund, where we are investing in clinical stage companies, many focus in Europe, but we invest also a part in the US, in Asia. And Sofinnova is probably one of the pioneer VC investors and healthcare in Europe, with more than 45 years old. Focusing on truly innovative science and technologies, and happy to be part of this panel, and thanks for inviting me.
So maybe if I can start off by saying, how do you think VC funding has changed over the last sort of 10 years or so? I mean, and what trends do you think you're seeing in biotech funding at the moment? What new trends have come up this year?
I think lacks capital allocation is probably the biggest trend. If you sort of, after the crisis, companies could get to quite meaningful data on sort of 15, 20, 25 million, and I think nowadays we're seeing these larger rounds that will give more runway, but I think some of that capital allocation is maybe not the best way to put dollars. On the other side, I think the type of companies and opportunities that we're seeing are clearer. They're clear in the sense that there are new biology discoveries that are making it much easier to translate something from an academic lab into a successful phase 2. And I think probably if we look at the statistics, the rate of success, which probably also comes from all the learnings of the last 20, 30 years of the industry, have really improved.
Okay. Does anyone else want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm not sure whether there is a one wise answer, but I would like to more look at from the kind of what we call the venture capital cycle, which is if you take a long-term view, we had always situations where there was a lot of capital and a lack of capital, and I think this is interlinked. So what in my view we experience right now is that 5, 6, 7 years ago we had a lack of capital, which led to a kind of that unsuccessful venture capital companies just disappeared, that all the companies rewrote their business plans, they were more efficient. The remaining venture capital funds, they financed these companies, they got low entry valuations, and then they were able, when the stock exchange and the stock market were coming up again in 2011, 12 or 13 in the US, to all sell their assets and capitalize on these, let me say, more difficult times in the, 5 years before. And with this success, they were able to raise new money, a successful fund, so the funds get bigger. The funds now have more management fee to deploy more people. More people needs to do more deals, and bigger funds will trigger other LPs to look, there's an interesting asset class, what other funds are in fundraising. So we have this cycle now that we have a lot of funds fully loaded with money. There is a tendency, and we can make the distinction between US and Europe, to partially overpay in terms of prices. And now the question is the cycle as 10 years ago again closing again, and we will see that some funds have, too expensive asset, they don't get to the right exit price and so on. But we will see. So far so good, because the stock market is pretty doing well, so maybe we can escape this cycle. But I would say, as far as US is concerned, we are a little bit cautious to invest right now in all these overhyped Series A rounds, 60 million. You can do that in specific cases, but not broadly. In Europe, we have still the situation, and this is the link to your business model. If you are specialized and you have your specific market access, you can still, I think, acquire the assets or the company to a reasonable pricing and hopefully get the return in these market.
Yeah, what I can add is that I think the fact we had more capital, I think it's Roger at the beginning of this event that say, basically VC are there to invent and pharma are there to develop and market. And what I observed in the last years is that because of more capital, because of stronger team, VC are also more and more involved in the development and more late stage. I think in the late stage, and it means that I think VC are more sophisticated today. And if we take an example for an orphan disease, that's true that it was a perfect space for VC because the cost of a phase 3 trial is absolutely achievable and affordable, and time to market is also shorter. And so VC invest a lot in that field, but it means having the skills to do that. So be able to design properly a trial, interact with regulatory bodies, prepare the market access. So I think, the more capital means also more sophisticated teams, and I think it's the positive consequence of that.
I know you personally you're focusing a lot on the sort of late stage funding, and I believe that's relatively unusual, and that there's a lot of investment in the early stage, or at least I saw some statistics this week that seem to indicate that. I mean, would you agree? Would you say that we need to have more late stage, or do you think there's too much in the early stage? Or
well, At Sofinnova, I think what we observed is that the seed and the venture capital, as it was just mentioned in the last years, was pretty well backed and financed with a quite innovative model as the Medici one, for sure. And on the other side of the spectrum, I would say that the growth capital and the private equity is also very well financed. It's very competitive there with quite crazy valuation too. But in the middle, what we can say the VC late stage, where we have companies with a proof of concept, but quite far from the break even and the marketing stage, where you need to raise 30, 40, 50, 60 million. Sometimes you are on the market, sometimes no. It's quite difficult to syndicate it in Europe, and most of the time you have to find the parties in the US or in Asia. I think it will be probably a topic. So we have identified this opportunity to launch this more late stage fund to fill this gap.
It's great that Sofinnova identified it a year later. We launched our late stage fund. No, I agree with that, and I think 7 years ago, the cryo industry was, there's not enough seed in Series A, there's not enough seed in Series A. Now I think there's probably an overabundance in a variety of geographies, right? I think the UK and France have got a lot of funding, but Netherlands as well. But I think most countries now have seen that resurgence of early capital. And there are those opportunities, and there's been some great stories in Europe. You look at Genmab. Genmab in 2012 was a 300 million euro market cap company. Now it's 10 plus, right? And that is thanks to the late stage capital that it was able to access, which actually can be a very lucrative business model, because there's a lot of situations where a late stage investor is going to make disproportionately more money with less risk, if we can say that, compared to a Series A investor.
No. You're going to say something?
We can continue, and you have probably more questions.
No, it's all right. I suppose I would say, so you all work for different VCs. Tell me, are you friends, frenemies, or competitors?
Yeah. This is also a little bit of a delicate question, because the thing is, we are also in a marketplace, though we are also fundraising, and we have to differentiate ourselves from others. So I think all in all, the business models of the venture capital companies have a great overlap of similarities, but then of course specific, let me say, points where they would like to differentiate from the others, such as geographic access, such as of course people, business models like Medici is doing more or less only company building. Yeah. Of course, you have to amend or adopt your business model also to the needs and to the marketplace. But I think the utmost important feature for venture capital companies is the long-term relationship to our investors. Because if an investor, a large LP, decides, yes, I want to deploy some money into biotech, they put a lot of effort in understanding the marketplace, and then they're selecting maybe 2 funds or 3 funds in Europe, 3 in the US, maybe in Asia, and then they want to continue the relationship and not just exchange 5 years later or 4 years later, because it's much more easy to say, okay, I know these people, I know that they are successful, what they're doing, I'm just part of the next fund and the next fund. And this is what happened in the US, that the large fund partnerships, Kleiner Perkins, Sequoia, Polaris, Atlas, they have raised, I don't know, the fund number 10 or 11, you are at fund number 9 or 8 or 9, so you're close to the double digit. Yeah. We had fund number 4, LSP is at number 6, I think. So this is that the industry has established itself a bit. So I think this is a very important factor. And then I think a lot of what we are doing has to do with being entrepreneurial and opportunistic. To really, we have to accept, or we have to anticipate the future, and this is what we try to do. Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you do to make yourself stand out at Forbion?
Delivering returns to our investors. Trying to understand the needs of pharma, because these are the ultimate buyer of our companies, and trying to stay in contact with innovation, with the founders and the entrepreneurs looking for money and having the real IP and the innovation. So it's a kind of value chain where a lot of, and this is I think the interesting thing of our industry, if you look at it from the outside, we have 3 different type of customers. We have the LPs, these type of people wearing a suit even in this room, and with a tie. And then we have the pharma people, they never would visit such an event, a completely different mindset, completely different type of people. And then we have the entrepreneurs, hopefully in this room. So we need to deal with these 3 different, but I have to add that pharma has really changed. They if I look back 15 years ago, it was more or less a closed shop, and then they opened, and now they act like us. They go to university. In fact, they're trying to compete. They close these partnerships with Max Planck or with whatever. Fred Hutch, and they try to direct access. And I think we have to talk to them anyway.
I mean, back to the original question. We're probably frenemies with a big fr at the front. I think we always try and work together, and there are parties that you work together with, and then you don't for 10 years for whatever reason, then you fall in love again. So I think, we're all part of the ecosystem, as Holger was saying, so we need to find ways of working together, especially if we want to be able to build companies that do get to raising later stage capital, right? We can never do it alone. In terms of differentiating yourself, I think you need to try and find your own angle. There are funds that are very good at taking your good story and turning it into a gigantic story. There are others, I take a line from Kevin Johnson's book, which is we look for people that are watchmakers who want to work with other watchmakers, right? That's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to help them build that product. And it's really projecting that out there, showing to LPs why you've changed your business model from what we were doing in the late 90s, early 2000s, and really showing that there is a financial benefit to them investing in this model, and there is which is linked to a success improvement in the outcomes of the investments, and that should also help self-select entrepreneurs that are really believing in their product and don't want their products diluted in some big pipeline, right? That's, I think, the difference that we can always tell to entrepreneurs is that, great, you can work with the nth pharma who will make you a beautiful promise and write you a reasonable check maybe on day 1. Then you're program 59. And there's about 7 people from that level up that can make a decision that 59 becomes 102. Whereas if you work with a VC, we're willing to take the pain to create a company, invest, disproportionate amount of our capital into your opportunity, because we believe in that opportunity.
And what has changed, to circle back to your first question, nowadays we can even finance phase 3 studies. And this is a big change for pharma, either at the public market in the US or with the help of larger funds, because this is also a tendency. There is so much money in the market, and you look at the Nasdaq, they all go earlier, and they're looking for the real opportunity. So if we have a company with good phase 2 data, and pharma is just not interested or giving us a bad deal, we take the step forward on our own. And this is an opportunity we had not 10 years ago. It was unbelievable to do that. But nowadays it's also with the help of the growth funds.
Back to your question, for our crossover fund, it's clear that we are more looking at partners and co-investors, depending the deal, depending the company, depending the investment case. But if you pick Europe, because we can invest both in private and public companies, so if you want to pick a European listed and public company, and part of your investment case is that you see an angle for a clear US story and something appealing for the US market with a management that is a good storyteller for US investors, you are happy to have one of two tier one specialist investor with you to back your strategy and to prepare the next step. Or if you have at the operational level a true leverage to develop a product in Asia or in China, you're also very happy to have the China partner and to bring the cash, but also the expertise, the local connection, and so on. So I do not see really our job and our constraints more as a true competitive landscape, but more at finding the right partners and co-investors in our deals.
So do you think it's in some ways, if you're comparing, because obviously you have to raise money as well, so is it easier or harder for a VC to raise money than a biotech?
Easy or harder to?
For a VC to raise money than a biotech to raise money? Because you have to raise money from your own investors, right? So.
Yeah, I don't know if it's easy or you have answers to that?
You have some more experience.
Take this one.
I think there are some similarities. If you are at the first seed round, so you have an innovation and no investor already invested, and you don't have a track record of how you deliver on your goals, then it is also difficult for a biotech startup to get the first round together. If you have shown that with the seed round you have achieved some milestones, let me say data from the first in vivo readout, whatever, and you are a successful manager, you have now an operational, let me say 10 people, you have built up your company, let me say in our case we really built bigger companies, then you can present yourself to the venture community and you can tick boxes, yes, I did this and this was successful. Then I think the A round is much more easier than the seed round. And the same is true for us. Yeah? If you are a new kid on the block with absolutely no track record and you go to an LP, just give me 100 million on my name, it's not so easy. It was impossible probably 10 years. Nowadays it's doable but not easy. But if you have already invested half of your first fund, you have delivered on one exit, your financial reporting is correct, you have nice LP meetings with nice dinners and all the relationship works, Fund 2 is probably much more easier than Fund 1. So it's all about delivering.
So Giovanni, yours is probably the newest, so I mean, how easy was it for you guys?
Yeah, so I mean, we could piggyback on the track record of the team, right? So, you know, actually the first Medici fund was raised as the seventh fund officially in the official documents, and then we changed the name. But, you know, I think the harder part, speaking to LPs, is that, you know, if you tell them a story and you tell them a strategy, and all of a sudden there's 4 times as much money on the table than you want, it's very easy to be greedy, right? Which, you know, if you have a track record nowadays, I think all of us here, all firms, when they raise funds, it's, you know, there's way more than you need. And the difficulty there is then, you know, being diligent and sticking to that and delivering on that and not getting FOMO and saying, well, if these guys are putting 100 million, why are we not doing it? And, you know, because we have a strategy. And I think for a biotech, you know, we heard from Michael before, you know, something fails, you pivot if your investors let you do that. But that's, you know, that's probably an easier switch than, you know, you raising a fund and a strategy. You do 2-3 investments that are not on strategy, 2 of them blow up. 2 years later, when you raise the next fund, they say, well, you're not really a man of your word, so, you know, I'm committing for another 10 years. So I think that's the difference between the two sides, right? We've got longer to deliver, but we need to make sure that we stay on point and on strategy, because LPs are committing to, you know, you want them to commit to 2 funds, so it's a 15-year relationship, and they don't like change too much in terms of what, you know, saying what you've promised.
Yeah, just one word. Just for our experience when we were on the road for this crossover fund, I think back to what we mentioned, it's good to differentiate a bit each from the other and to have a kind of new story. But the point is that as not to be too original also, and to tick the box of the LPs. And it's clear that we face sometimes some difficulties to convince that we can be a good team, a great team, by investing both on private and public companies. Because, and particularly in Europe, we have a kind of burden and kind of wall between the private and the public, which is not the case at all in the US. You just find the right asset at the right price, whatever they are, private or public. So it was one of the challenge to say, we don't care if it's private, public, we can structure our deals in the better way we can, and we just want to pick the best asset everywhere. So that's what sometimes part of the challenge. Be original, but not too much.
So tell me, what do you look for when you, I mean, it's a very broad question, but what do you look for when you're looking for who to invest in? I mean, are there some key things that stand out for you?
So we are fully in the aligned with the long-term strategy of Sofinnova. Is that we put the management at the top level in our investment criteria. We need our champion. We need to treat our champion. So I heard that focusing on CEO. Not only the CEO, but really have a confidence on the executive management team is something absolutely key for us. And then, of course, we are all looking at disruptive science, new technology that could really address unmet medical need for sure. So it's something where we really all looking at, but we don't have a really investment and interest for Me Too products or things like that. It's not our business for sure. And then it's just building an investment case, as we say, with applying the strategy we presented to our LPs with clear value inflection point, and be convincing that we can deliver right and strong return.
So how about you?
Yeah, I would summarize it as, the pitch needs to tell me why should I care, and the plan needs to tell me why is somebody going to care about my investment. And that is, first and foremost, the biology, and by that I mean, why am I hitting this target for this disease? A lot of people come to me and say, we've got this wonderful drug, it does nothing, I give kilos to mice and they run. Then it's probably not a drug, it's probably just, water. But the drug needs to do the right thing for the right disease, and early and late, I think, right? There's always, I think that filter shouldn't change when you're looking at a particular product. And then how am I going to show the next step of value, which is, do I take it through proof of concept? Do I do a large phase 2B where I can show that there's a minimum effective dose, or a large phase 3 where I confirm efficacy and safety? And there it's also, because always remember, a VC is an investor. We will look at a company, we'll look at an opportunity differently than a pharma. A pharma is looking for, how can I maximize my upside? We've seen companies, pharmas, where we've sold them a preclinical asset and they started spending 20 million on a commercial injector. We said, well, you don't even know if the drug works. Yes, but if we get to phase 2 and it works and we don't have the injector, then we lose 6 months, right? So they have a very different incentive. They'll happily waste 20 million if it's gonna gain them, $1 billion in sales. Whereas at investors, it's always, what in your plan are we gonna deliver for the right amount of capital and time invested? So there'll be diseases or technologies that we think are fantastic, but we as investors are going to say, we're not the right people to help you with this because we have our constraints in time and how much we think is the right amount of risk before taking a binary read on an event.
I think the big question is, what is more important, management or the IP and the underlying asset? And it is an always debated topic at our firm, because we have always the ability to change management, but we cannot change the product. So the thing is, and especially in Europe, where we all believe we have a lot of interesting assets, as you identify and we identify, we have unfortunately still a lack of talent to develop these assets. We have improved over the years, but it is no comparison to the East Coast or West Coast in the US. We have also regions in the US with a lot of good universities, but no people. It's not only in Europe that we have a lot of people. So we take the approach that we, of course, very carefully listen to the management or we believe whether the management is able to deliver, but finally we do a lot of due diligence about the compound. Is this compound developable in the indication? Is the right indication? Is the data strong enough? And at the end, we have done investments where we said, this is really an interesting new approach, very innovative, this will make the difference in this specific disease, but these are not the right people. And then we are not just saying, no, we are coming back, and now it depends if it's a new team or an already financed business, and we are quite frank and open. Listen, we would like to, as an example, to lead the series ABC, but we need to agree with you that we would like to introduce those changes, otherwise it won't work. And the problem is that this is always a risk, because in German we say, as mentioned, it is this. It's about psychology, people, interaction, relationship. It is always a risk, and some investors are just not willing to take this. They're saying, no, it can be as exciting as it is. If it's not the right people, we're not doing that. So a little bit in between. Okay.
So I mean, that sort of brings me on to a little about sort of company build idea. So I know VCs have sort of slightly different approaches on this, sort of, bringing in management, that kind of thing. So I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts on how the best way to do that is.
We have done it in different different types. So we have examples where we have, as an example, we have in-license asset from pharma or found assets in universities, and then we do the first job in our own firm and then gradually hire people. And we have also examples where people arrive in our office with an idea or compound, and then we support the people with their search result because they have identified the compound. So a variety of examples,
I think on the management team, right? If you're doing early stage drug discovery, you don't need a management team. You need a drug hunter to begin with that finds the drug, whether that's internal, external, who can also, or it might be another person, which is the drug developer, right? The person that can tell you what you need to do, and very importantly, what you don't need to do, because every time you generate a piece of data, you're gonna have to live with it. So if you're gonna do, we had an example of a company in the osteoarthritis space, and the standard model is a meniscal tear model, which has got nothing to do with osteoarthritis. There's no clinical observation of the model, but somehow pharma, who has developed so many wonderful drugs in OA, said that's the model we want to see. Or we said, well, that's BS. We're not going to do that model. We'll do it later. Let's see first if we can find a model that mimics osteoarthritis. And we're working with the right drug hunter and drug developer. If you meet the guy, he's not the big flashy CEO manager, but he's a guy that tells you, this is what you need to do to know whether after your first million, you're going to put the next 20 million. Lo and behold, we did the right model. It worked fantastic. We were able to replicate other drugs that failed and why they failed. And then we did the pharma asked model, and it was nothing, zero. But if we had sort of listened to the wrong person, who sometimes management comes from big pharma, right, and they have a certain vision. And I think for us, the important thing looking at teams is, is there somebody there, or do we have somebody in our network that we can put there to be that, and we were discussing champion, but really the drug hunter and the drug developer that tells you these are the critical risks that we need to take off the table in the first couple of years to then decide to go big and 20 million and do your nice phase 2 with high confidence.
Okay.
I think we are never the investment that ticks all the box, for sure. So I think the game is really to find and to build the optionality we may have in our investments. So it could be not the right management for the at the time of investment, or it could be a good one, but just to a certain point of time, and prepare this transition. We talk about science, targets, having also some optionality there, because, okay, right targets, right disease, right mechanism of action, but sometimes you have to adapt, you discover things. It never happen how you have anticipated from the beginning. So I think it's very important to, when you build your conviction, your investment case, your plan, to work and to keep optionality, because it's the way you have to manage. Signing the check, everybody can do, but then it's really a question of execution, and it's the major part of our job.
Now, I wanted to give the opportunity to open it up to the audience, because I feel like, it's very hot, and I feel like it's good to start a conversation. To make sure you're all still awake.
You won't have the best spot in the room. On purpose chosen. Changing a little bit, because we, my company, Minicom, we have a allogeneic cell-based therapy. We are in different types of tumors, including liver cancer. And this is, I just bring this to raise that, and because of that, we started having a lot of interest from Chinese companies and then Chinese investors. And so I've been there, going around, talking with investors, and that's been a very interesting experience, So I wanted to get your perspective, because we saw companies that can only invest in RMB, other ones can invest in dollars, a little bit of a mix. Some were taking more risk, very few. Other ones more conservative. Have you been working? But there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money there. Have you been working with Chinese funds or investors and looking at,
okay,
picking up on some of these projects?
I can start, and I'm sure my colleagues will complete. So what is true is that Asian investor, whatever the strategic or the pure investor or the hybrid model strategic and with an investment arm, are more and more present here. When I say here in Europe, all aware about the CFIUS constraints they have. So I think it's absolutely a momentum that will should last some few years, that we have this Asian investor more and more looking at our assets. And as they have started with US, when they have sometimes a look on the valuation of our assets, they are quite surprising. Even sometimes they are less price sensitive, but it's quite appealing for them. Our view is that they start to firstly have some exposure and be LPs in some funds. So we have Chinese LPs in our funds, and for them it was a good way to have an exposure, indirect exposure, and their interest is by co-investments, and it's something that we think is a way also to bring value to our companies, to say, oh, we know these guys, they are investors in our fund, and they could be interested in some point of time in a portfolio company and make the link. So we think there is a leverage, and here is more synergy. And sometimes we have the Chinese in front of us that could put a big check, and there is a dilemma for the companies to say, oh, I pick the VC. Okay, which is will bring really value added. It's the classical way to do, or finally I take this big check from a China that is, well, it's when you have the two offers on the table at the end of the day, it's not a bad thing for you. But it's clear that we have this kind of competition in our side more and more because they are investing clearly in directly in companies, and they are looking at true innovation now. They started with generics, but now they really want to invest in true science. So I think it's another key player for the Europe, and at Sofinnova we, as I said, we have most of the time Asian angle and something to play. So having one of the best co-investors and players in the field that could co-invest in our companies, sometimes we are very happy to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think one should look at them just like any other investor, right? Why would I go with this investors over another? You know, you probably make the same thought process if you've got, you know, a not known investors that puts a high valuation to get in, you got some great blue chip to give a low valuation, and you're always just trying to see who's going to help you get there fastest, you know, the best outcome. The caveat there is that there's a culture difference, political issues, and it's a country where you really need to have local, strong local partners. So probably the firms that have got a U.S. presence as well, those are, will be made up of people that have got a lot of exposure, had exposure to Western style biotech and investing and are applying that. So we haven't directly worked with investors. I think we might have an LP as well, in a similar construct, sort of trying to also look at direct investing. But also now, companies there, if you look away from the headlines of the ridiculous valuations that then tend to crash pretty quickly once they go public, but there are big players there that have become, from nothing to commercial stage. You look at the PD1s there. They are now, and probably in the next few years, going to become serious players. And deals in China can be very attractive. Probably people are going to become a little more cautious of doing deals like this, saying, well, there's a lot of value actually that I'm giving up if I do an early China deal. But it's really opened up as a space, and we have started to dabble there, go there, understand how it works, because I think there is that side of understanding how things get done, and the clear lack of transparency, I would say, in certain aspects of the business there.
We don't have any Chinese investors, I think, in our private portfolio, but as crossover investors before IPO, we see a lot of Chinese money. I think they still look for kind of more, not fast liquidity, but I think they like to have the valuation in their books, the public valuation. Yeah, it's a large market, so many companies are looking at China also from a market perspective, and it will become more and more important.
I think they changed the regulations recently, didn't they? So the Chinese government, so now it's easier to bring in drugs from abroad. So I guess that might have affected it somewhat. So I mean, I wonder. Oh, sorry, Carrot. Can I take that?
I'm from pharma myself. Apart from investing in your funds, right? Are there other collaboration models between VCs and pharma, between biotech VCs and pharma? And I really mean not at the company level, more at the fund level. And by the way, great all your comments. I like them very much. I think it's more for you.
I have not fully understood, but I'm just trying to answer. So there are several collaboration models. The most easiest one is a pharma company just becomes an LP in your fund, pari passu to all the others, which means no special rights, nothing, just get the reports. There are some collaboration models where the pharma company gets a kind of, and this is then mostly dependent on the proportional amount to the fund size. So let me say if they invest more than 10%, they might ask for a kind of advisory board seat. It's always the question whether you would like to give that, because you get these kind of tainted, so my fund, there is BMS or Roche in, is it really safe to send my business plan to Forbion, something like that. So it's a delicate thing. And then I think there are also models that a pharma company says, I want to have not my own corporate fund, but a fund which I'm using with external managers to scout for the best projects and to get things done.
I mean, I think we've had pharma in our house for 7 years now. Two of them to begin with, 3. And I think it's a great symbiotic relationship. We get, the global heads of R&D of these companies, therapeutic area heads, on our SAB, which lets us access their institutional knowledge, both from a diligence perspective and a portfolio development perspective. Again, giving granularity of, you should do this model in this particular way, right? And because it's going to give you an answer or not, or don't do the 500 mouse experiment. Do this particular one in vitro because for us it's failed, right? So it's mainly to learn from their mistakes. That's always the best learnings. And this has no rights, on the back end, on the front end. They wanna acquire something, they gotta come to the front door like everybody else does. And it's our job as investors to make sure that companies are comfortable to speak to us, and also that our investors are comfortable that we're not cutting deals with these pharma. But I think as investors, part of our job is to maintain those relationships with all potential acquirers of our companies. And it can be more formal, less formal. It really depends on who you are and the type of relationship that you have. I guess, I don't know if any funds have ever done joint ventures of there's been some incubators, joint ventures in Israel. But I think it's you as an investor need to see where is the value that I think I'm going to get and where can I give value back to the pharma, of course, right? It should be a two-way street.
Okay.
I have a question to Cedric. In this fund, do you rely on the European public markets for your fund model?
So it's a very good question. I think everybody knows that, particularly on the public side, Europe is quite difficult, and difficult because size of the deals are most of the time not very big and not enough to really back and fund the companies to the real and important value inflection point. We have a lack of liquidity, so we have stocks that suddenly can lose 20-30% with just some stocks sold to the market. So we see European market as potentially a good entry point because of that sometimes we have very attractive valuation for good companies, and we can explain the reason why for more technical reason than really operational or fundamental reasons. We have a very crap valuation for this company, but certainly then the goal is to avoid the valuation trap. It's good to have a value call and value opportunity, but you want to avoid the trap. So it's where the work starts to how I can strengthen this company, change the way she presents themselves to investors, help to cross the ocean and to find and to communicate to the right people there, to the right bankers, to the right investors. So it's a lot of work, but certainly if you pick the one that has the potential to do this job, you may have a good return. So it's definitely not a finality. You have to build. But sometimes, and particularly right now, as it was mentioned at the beginning of the conference, is that when we compare the private valuation with the public, right now there is really a mismatch and a gap between public and private valuation, even in Europe.
I think we always get this question or similar questions, and I think people need to bring in the public funds in these conversations, because we're not the one that are going to increase the liquidity. We're going to buy and hold, right? Either we're in there or we're putting money in there, through a pipe, and we are there. We're not traders. We're there for the outcome. We're there for a particular piece of data to come out. So I think that it's the specialization and the sophistication that has come through the VC early stage, late stage now needs to trickle up to the public funds, which are not, coming in and out of companies and supporting those companies.
Yeah, I had a question regarding the factors you mentioned before, that the volumes of available money are increasing. It's more easy for you to collect money. There's more dynamic in the market, so the valuations or the volumes of Series A seem to increase. Do you also see an appetite of your investors to get a faster return on investment, so that you have to set up your funds for faster return? And if that is the case, how does this influence your interaction with biotechs and with the founders?
I mean, I think every LP will want faster return. But I think there's a mismatch between VC and LPs in terms of a VC is incentivized on a multiple, and LPs incentivized on IRR. And I think, again, and Holger, you please comment because you have a lot more experience, that as long as you're delivering multiple and a good IRR, you're not going to get pressure, right?
I think we have competed in the last years, especially in Europe, with all the asset classes available to LPs in general. And to be honest, I think the asset class of venture capital, and especially the subclass of venture capital life sciences, and then if you look, venture capital life science Europe has more or less disappointed in terms of IR. So there was a kind of a very small, tiny allocation in general. And I think what has played in favor for us was that, as I said before, in this venture capital cycle, that and there's a very nice statistic from the European Investment Fund, who is LP in many pan-European or European funds, that on the long term, the European life science funds, they have really over the last years delivered in terms of IRR. Topic number one. Topic number two, there's also a sentiment change on the LP side that they not only want to deliver returns in terms of financial returns, there is also a kind of what we call today the kind of impact investing. You want to do something meaningful with your money, and this is coming from, you know, big discussions we have nowadays. It's about health, it's about ecology, it's about all the meanings. And some LPs are just saying, before I do another 10 million ticket for leverage buyout fund number 7A in California South State, I probably invest maybe 10 million in a specific healthcare fund for a variety of reasons, but not only for IRR. But of course, there is a lower bar you should deliver, otherwise you just are not part of the crowd. You don't get reviewed. There's a general observation that, of course, first of all, I think public money is non-dilutive, so it serves everybody around the table, founders and the VCs. The problem we see sometimes is, especially if you look to drug development, that the grant money is used, but not in a way we would use the same amount if it's VC money. Yeah? It's, okay, I'm doing a kind of principal investor-driven trial, and then at the end, if you look at the results, okay, it was uncontrolled, it was not the right patient group, it was no biomarker, blah, 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 yeah? And then you can make a restart. So it is not about the money, it's about what is the structure and the idea behind how to deploy the money in the right manner or in the right form to get the results the farmer or whatever would like to see. Yeah.
I think it can be very, very powerful. And there are different ways, you know, there are just free money basically, you know, a grant. There are, you know, the difficulties when this money comes with some strings attached too early on, and it just, you know, sort of reach through on IP if something goes wrong or anything like that. You know, and then you have a lot of, especially in the Benelux, you have a lot of local funds which really help. a lot, I think. You know, your first $500,000, $1 million, if used properly, can really, really help. You know, on the flip side, I've seen companies that have gone on government grants up to 5-7 million, and you see what they've achieved, and you say, come on, you know, I'll invest in you, but I'm not going to give you, you know, I don't think you have 5 million of value. Oh, but we have invested 5 million. Like, wasted probably 4 of them. And that's a little bit where money is if it's too easy to come by. I'd love to hear your comment, because I think France, there's been a huge amount of money delivered out there. And I don't know, because I think the market cap in France of biotech is relatively decent. Now, I don't know how that, you know, how many billions of euros have been given to early stage companies. So, you know, if used effectively, it's fantastic. The opposite is also true.
Yeah, no. If we talk about France, it's clear that we have a public funding ecosystem that's definitely very helpful for our companies. We have the research tax credit, which is where you can save us 30% of your research costs. Is quite a lot and help plenty of companies. And we have very diversified kind of grants. But what I observed recently, and maybe where we don't, it's not a way we can better control, but is when we have a kind of consortium, when we can mix in the same project the academic center, where most of the time the science goes, that has sometimes, or it's the right time to do, sign a partnership with the biotech and part of our companies, and put together the key KOLs and the key person around the project. So when you can mix and have this kind of project where you have several pieces to get together, I think is where it's better managed. And I observe in France more and more this kind of structure project with clear milestone. Is also most of the time tranche. When we announce a 20 million grants project, be sure that there is some milestone to achieve. So, not saying that it's always super well financed and optimized, but first, it's welcome for us. And secondly, I observed better way to structure this public financing.
Okay, perhaps got time for one more question, I think.
So if money is relatively available in the industry right now, do you offer any kind of additional services to the companies you invest? For example, all the biotech companies always have the same principle: we have to go out of the lab, we have to try to get into clinical trials, and then further down the supply chain. So you at any point in time say, okay, please use this serum, we're going to give them, please use that data center for GXP, please use that logistics problem, because they're very good when it comes to the cold chain, which you might use in biological products, right?
That's part of the differentiation, right? If you're a checkbook, it's going to be difficult. If you are somebody that can say, look, I like your project because I did something similar 4 years ago, and these are the learnings, right? Also what I said about learning from pharma's mistake, and I can tell you, don't do that, do this. That shaves, $500,000 off your budget and doesn't make you waste, 12 months doing something relevant. When we were at Index, the tech side had actually a services team, which was HR, media, social media, all this kind of stuff. And I think for biotech, the portfolios are smaller, and the skills needed are probably different for different companies. But that is, I hope that when an entrepreneur decides to work with me, is not because of my checkbook, but because everything that is behind and the experience that we can say exactly those things is work with X, not with Y, or do things one way, not the other. That's where a biotech VC should really be adding value.
This is very true for your business model, and it's partially also true for, let me say, the more classical one. I give you an example. We see some companies, they have probably decided maybe 2 years ago, yes, I'm doing my seed round with, I'm sorry, I have to, let me say, with a kind of business angel network. People having a lot of money, and for whatever reason they want to deploy some money in probably the biotech company around the corner.
It's fun.
It's a lot of fun. They are close to the professor who did the invention. So we see a lot of these examples, and then they go out and raise the Series A, and then the first thing I see, okay, they got a very nice valuation first, and secondly, sometimes similar to these unused grant money, they didn't do the things we would have done. So I think sometimes we have to explain the founders, yes, we believe your company is worth maybe 5 million pre-money. You will lose more from your ownership, but we know, as he was saying, we know exactly what you need to do, and we would also support you in your way forward, because we bring you together with those people we believe are the right partners for you to develop your business. And even with companies or with management teams who have done it before, it's always a good thing to be integrated in a kind of ecosystem, because it's still a very risky business, and what you need to do is you need to really manage all the risk. It's not only the product risk, there are many, many risks outside.
Yeah, so maybe one point that I can add is that the fact we have a bit more cash and more leeway than a few years ago is to benefit from that, also to help the company to attract the right talents and the good one. It's extremely competitive. If you want to attract the top guy, the top CEO, most of the time in the US, as you mentioned, and you want to come in Europe in your company, you need to pay. You need to pay. You need to, as Giovanni say, convince that you have the right investors that will bring value. But it's something that I think it's one of our priority and main challenge is to attract the talents, the champion, the right people in our companies. And that's clear that if we can have more cash and more flexibility on that, it could help to do that even, once again, super competitive.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes,
sorry, one more question? Yeah, go for it.
I have a question regarding IP. Did you saw some changes over the last year? Has the quality of IP changed over time? That maybe the professors and the researchers are more aware of the importance of IP? Or did you see a lot of cases where they say, nice technology, but not sloppy patent management, this and that?
I can only speak for Germany, and in Germany I think it is still not a perfect situation. We faced a situation where we saw a nice publication, and we found out that they published before they filed the IP. Also, we have processes at universities that should avoid that. So this is the worst part. Then we have processes where IP is rightfully filed, and then, because we have the system in Germany with the tech transfer offices, and the privilege of the professors are were I think eliminated 2003 or so with the change of the law. We see cases where the technology transfer has filed the IP but not really developed an IP strategy, how to really position this. But then we also see really proper filing and prosecution, and I think the tech transfer environment in Germany has improved over the last years. It could be a little bit more proactive, so the interaction with the investors could be a little bit more, organized in a way. But we have now conferences like BioVaria from the Helmuts, from Arsenion. So in all over, I think it is okay. But I still find it pity that people still think of, as far as Germany is concerned, I'm a professor, I'm not commercial, so I publish or perish, but I'm not going to file the IP. But we will still find these people. Yeah.
I think it just goes with experience of the tech transfer office, and as well the PI, right? Because in some centers like the VIB in Belgium, they don't care if you published Nature, if you're filing IP that is being commercialized, they'll give you, they'll keep funding you. So, and even if you go to a top center, you'll work on one case and it's fantastic. You'll work on the next case and it's a disaster.
Yeah.
So I think it's about also trying to lower the barrier of engagement, even pre-IP, with some of these centers to make sure that they are engaging in this. I've seen universities that have filed IP in the Principality of Monaco and paying fees on that. It's like, how many patients are you going to treat there? 1 every 10 years. So there's that engagement and making sure that there's comfort to discuss IP strategy even before it's there. So I would say more is happening, so experience is being accrued, so things are improved. It's never perfect, but I think at every aspect of our industry, things are continuously improving.